Hey there, BookTube. Noah. Everyone who reads it must converse. Got Yasmin at To the
Hi.
Lithouse in the house
Hello.
again. We're doing some more Borges. We did
Yes.
all of fictions. We've already gone through the Aleph as well. We're
Mm-hmm.
making our way through the Maker, but we decided to do this series where we're just talking about some of our favorites from the whole collection. Who knows how many we'll do, right?
Yeah, Sundays with Borges.
It's mind blowing stuff. So
Yeah.
today is the Garden of Forking Paths. What a mind blow of a
Uh-huh.
short work. We got nine, maybe 10 pages, and multiple kind of nested narratives, maybe two or three. One is like a historical narrative, and then two kind of narratives going on, and it's spectacular. It's wild how Borges makes all this happen at once.
Mm-hmm.
You ready to get to it?
Yeah. Let's do
All
it.
right, cool. So it starts off. We're in the middle of World War II, right? Or the end of World War II. The Third Reich
Mm-hmm.
is falling, and it says in the first paragraph there's an Allied offensive against the Sierra Montauban line. That's in France. So this and it is a British victory, an Allied victory on the Western Front of the war, and there is a a German operative that falls. Runeberg is is the name of the guy that calls our narrator, but it's not him. The beginning of this narrative of our narrator, Dr. Yusun, is dot dot dot, and I hung up the receiver. So he didn't talk, but he heard on the line a British voice, a captain. What's his name?
Richard
Richard
Madden.
Madden. Right, right, right. So, and he knows this guy. Our main character is a Chinese uh, operative for Nazi Germany that's actually behind enemy lines. He's in England. He's in Staffordshire undercover, and he's trying to seek out, I guess, strategic targets for the Nazis, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with what's going on with the war, any he can't get any information out from where he's at. But he's in complete terror right at the beginning of this story. He knows he's going to die. He knows the Third Reich is going to fall. His right hand man, either his superior or maybe somebody just a lateral from him, but somebody who he's in contact with that's in France, has been taken out, either killed or captured. And I love how Borges does this, because I just want to touch on this. This is what
Yeah.
Borges does to make something feel so real. Okay. That footnote at the end, see, we're getting a statement from our main narrator before he's put to death. He's been captured and he's been put to death, and he's given his statement before this is the last, 3 hours or so of his life or something like that. And he says it meant that Runeberg had been arrested or murdered. Him hearing the British operative's voice on the phone. And then the footnote is, what a bizarre and despicable supposition that he had been murdered. And it's a justification for it. The Prussian spy Hans Rabner, um, aka Victor Runeberg, had turned an automatic pistol on his arresting officer, Captain Richard Madden. Madden, in self defense, inflicted the wounds on Rabner that caused his subsequent death. Like, you're in the middle of a war. You don't have to justify shooting the enemy, but they do that, and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of literary, scholarly, maybe in that way, just serves to make these stories so real when they're complete fabrications. Borges is awesome at it, that's for sure. So our main character pulls a number out of pulls a name out of the phone book and decides that he needs to go and visit this guy, jumps on a train, and heads to a suburb of another, maybe 30 minutes away by train, I think is what he said, a suburb of Fenton, less than half an hour away by train. And he jumps in on a train, and he's going to, what's his name? Albert?
Mhm.
Albert something. I have
Stephen Albert.
Stephen Albert, that's right. So he's going to Stephen Albert. And getting on the train, Madden shows up and misses him by moments. What like a breathtaking little, I mean, you're just right in it. This is one page into it, maybe a page and a half, and we have this kind of near miss where he almost just gets caught, and he's terrified, crouching down, staying away from the horrible window, far from the feared window. It says it's awesome. And we have this kind of thing where you could see maybe that could have worked out another way. Our story could have just ended right there, right?
Mhm.
If Madden had shown up a little bit earlier, or he took a little bit of a longer decision to flee.
Yeah.
Kind of like a little, who knows with that. So, I loved how he opened it up, and I'm just going to touch on one thing, that when he says, this is our narrator. I reflected that all things happen to oneself and happen precisely now. Century follows century, yet events occur only in the present. Countless men in the air, on the land and sea, everything truly happens to me. And it's kind of poetic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it really serves to put you there, that we're in this guy's we're present with just him. This is his story, and it's
Yeah.
real. It's gotten real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
For him.
and something that I wanted to mention is that, well, you're talked about the beginning of the story really well, and in the beginning we first get this historical account of the event, and then we zoom in and we talk about a day that seems very insignificant in that history book. So they say something like, this this was delayed, the attack was delayed, or something like that. It was delayed because there was rain. And that was like a very insignificant event, but that's important in our story. Like you said, we're in there with our protagonist, who's called Yu Sun. Was that the name?
Yeah,
Um,
Dr. Yu's son.
right, we're there with him. This event, or this day that seemed very insignificant in a history textbook, is to us very important because we're reading this from Yu Sun's perspective, and yeah, we're there with him.
Right. And so, and just to make sure, he's a Chinese operative for the
Hmm.
Nazi Party. That's who we're following, and he's being pursued by a British officer, a British captain now, that has his number. He's on him. And so,
Yeah.
but so it's the a Borges thing as well, where we're kind of following the bad guy. You know, we're kind of getting all this amazing story right here is coming from the mouth of the bad guy.
Yeah.
And I wanted to point out, because this is whatever he's doing, it's not clear why he needs to find Stephen Albert at this point, and what his plan is, except for just to get there. But he doesn't do it for any wonderful or high-minded reason. He does it because he senses that the leader looked down on people of my race. I sense that the leader looked down on people of my race, the countless ancestors whose blood flows through my veins. I wanted to prove to him that a yellow man could save his armies. And so he
Hmm.
does it for ego.
Yeah.
He does it to prove that Chinese people are on par with everybody else.
Yeah, I was also reading that and noticed it, and I was gonna bring it up because so Richard Madden is Irish, and
Right.
he's
An
working for
Irish
the British Army.
Englishman. Right, right, right.
Right, because so we
Mm,
get, like you said, this from the perspective of the enemy, but the enemy is sympathizing with or empathizing with Richard Madden in the sense that he says, I think it's the first page, that Richard Madden was Irish and working for the British. Didn't
right.
he have a need to sort of prove himself? So we
Right.
see a parallel between Yu Sun and Richard Madden there.
Right. I totally, and just the page before, it was like, okay, it says that he was a happy a happy soldier. Talking about Madden, who was no doubt, yeah. It occurred to me that that brawling and undoubtedly happy warrior did not suspect that I possessed a secret. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is a conflict of egos.
Yeah.
Madden, his ego is to find, he's going to be, honored, honors heaped on him for finding these uh, Nazi operatives that are in Britain.
Mm-hmm.
And his honor, his ego is to get word to the leader, just said as the leader, who is obviously Hitler, get word out about a strategic target to prove himself, and it's just this kind of conflict of egos. That's what it is on the surface here, and I love it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
he gets off the train, and these boys on the platform see him and just say, "Hey, are you going to Stephen Albert's house?" And it's kind of weird, and you don't really know why. They just know what's up until you meet Stephen Albert,
Mm-hmm.
because Stephen Albert is an Englishman, a Briton, who is living in a home that is very Chinese style. He's playing Chinese music.
Mm-hmm.
He's carrying a paper lamp out to the gate to meet him, and he's surrounded by Chinese manuscripts, and ancient Chinese manuscripts at that. So just by this man being a Chinese, our narrator being a Chinese person, it makes sense that they would say, "Hey, oh, you're going to Stephen Albert's house. He's down the way."
Mm-hmm.
But they say how to get to his house. You take down that road there to the left, and you take a left at every crossing. Now that is a surefire way to get through any maze. It might take you a long time because you're going to just keep going around one wall, right? But if you do that and you keep your hand on one wall, choose left or right. Borges is always illustrating the left, but choose one and you'll get through the maze eventually. It's a surefire way, unless the maze is changing as you're doing it or something like that. So he starts doing this and he's reminded of a maze. And then we hear that this is where we start seeing another level of narrative, the history of our main narrator. You want to say something about that before I
Yeah,
on?
so he he's getting to Stephen Albert's place, and like you said, he's turning left, because that's what he was instructed to do, and he is reminded of a labyrinth, because of the reasons you said, and that's when he sort of begins to remember this idea that one of his ancestors had, which was basically, I don't know how to describe it,
Yeah, I mean, he was like
but
he was like a leader, but then
yeah.
he forsakes his leadership and goes
Hmm.
off by himself to create a
Hmm.
labyrinth and a
Yeah.
book. He said, and it's like two different things maybe, and he goes off to create a
Yeah.
book in a
but
labyrinth, and he dies. And
but
yeah, go
it's
ahead.
there's like a lot of mystery surrounding that, and nobody really knows what the book is, what a labyrinth is. Because he would just say, I'm off to write this book or to build this labyrinth, and he would just go off and do that, and nobody really knew what was going on with that. But he's reminded of that in that moment. And he has
Right.
sort of this experience in which he sees, I'm seeing the world in an abstract way, or I don't know what it is in the translation, but or I'm perceiving the world in an abstract way, sort of as a labyrinth.
Yeah. It's totally like a kind of a trippy
Mm-hmm.
part right there, and you can get a feel that like, okay, well, this, and you just get a little bit of history on this guy, and it's
Yeah.
cool. It's really cool. And but he starts kind of looking like that. The evening was near yet infinite. He forgot for a minute that he was a pursued man. He felt himself for an indefinite while the abstract perceiver of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of,
Yeah.
it's just beautiful Borgesian stuff.
Yeah.
And he gets to the gate, and Stephen Albert comes out to the gate for him, and immediately he starts talking to him in his own language. He starts speaking Chinese to him. He's a British guy. I see that the compassionate Si Peng has undertaken to remedy my solitude. You will no doubt wish to see the garden. And he says, the garden? And he says, the garden of forking paths. Something stirred in my memory, and I spoke with incomprehensible assurance. The garden of my ancestor, Sui Pin? And he says, Stephen Albert says, your ancestor? Your illustrious ancestor? Please come in. And then we're like, what is happening right
What?
now?
Yeah. And so is Yu San. Yeah.
how
That's right.
how how does this happen? So they start talking. As it turns out, this Stephen Albert is a scholar of the highest order who is studying and has studied these writings that are indecipherable as far as our narrator is concerned, and his whole uh, lineage and Chinese people are concerned, that it's just useless, indecipherable nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
But this scholar here is talking about how amazing of a labyrinth that it is, and starts really expounding on it. Um, he says, this is awesome part. Two circumstances led me to the final solution of the problem. One, the curious legend that Sui Pin had intended to construct a labyrinth which was truly infinite. And two, a fragment of a letter I have discovered. And Albert stood. His back was turned to me for several moments. He opened a drawer on the black and gold writing cabinet, and he pulls out a letter written by his ancestor. And it says, I leave to several futures, not to all, my garden of forking paths.
So up to now, it's crazy. Um, it feels like a coincidence, and that's what I thought the first time I read it. And we talked a bit about fate and how this all feels very fateful. That this man is in Britain and he's Chinese, so also already the fact that he's working for Germany, but he's Chinese, so already that is, strange. And then he's being pursued in Britain, and he we don't know yet at this point in the story, but he goes to this man Albert for a specific reason, and then he happens to have his ancestors secret, right?
Right. And
So
he's
it feels
telling
like
him
fate.
all about it.
Mm-hmm.
He's just spilling his guts to him.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So what it really comes down to is, and that's why I have Dark Matter by Blake Crouch out here, because this is a more modern story that is using an idea called the multi-world theory. This is a scientific model that comes from pure mathematics, but it is a model that is kind of like every choice that we make leads us down a certain path. But if we had made a different choice, we'd be going a different way in
Mm-hmm.
our life, right? And those choices can range from inconsequential stuff to very life altering choices. They all create different paths. That all those uh, different realities are equally valid
Mm-hmm.
as far as the maths are concerned, as far as like the structure of reality in some kind of way. So we use so that model has come out. And this story predates that theory. Did you know that? That like,
Um, no, I didn't. I did
yeah,
not.
Borges didn't even, I mean, nobody was, that theory, the multi-world theory, did not even come up from the scientific study and from university study and scholarship at all. Borges did this
Interesting.
first.
He came up with it. We
And
see that a lot in his stories, where he
right.
just predicts something that's going to be discovered later, or
So
he
he's saying
discovers it.
naturally there are various possible outcomes. So and so can kill the intruder. The intruder could kill him. They can both live. They can both be killed, and so on. In Supin's novel, all of the outcomes in fact occur. Each is the starting point for further bifurcations. Once in a while, the paths of the labyrinth converge. For example, you come to this house, but in one of the possible paths, you are my enemy. In another, you're my friend. If you can bear my incorrigible pronunciation, we shall read a few pages. And he starts reading from this guy's ancestors' manuscript. It's insanity.
Yeah. Yep.
And he's totally, I mean, he gets to a really weird spot. He's reeling, he's feeling away. And I don't know if this is a made up word or not, but we were talking about it there. From that moment on, I felt all about me and within my obscure body an invisible, intangible pullulation, not that of the divergent, parallel, and finally coalescing armies, but an agitation more inaccessible, more inward than that, yet those armies somehow prefigured. So he starts feeling this pullulation, and it's just like a reeling, being, maybe being pulled in multiple directions.
A
That
feeling he
there's,
can't really understand.
right. It's awesome, and he just keeps on. Albert just keeps on expounding to him what this text is all about, and it comes down to that it's about time, right? We've
Hmm.
we've kind of touched on it there. It's about how time diverges into, um, because of and our place as far as our effect on time. It's by our choices,
Hmm.
and I love how he does it. He says. In a riddles whose answer is chess, what's the only word that must not be used? And the guy says chess, the word chess. And Albert says, exactly. The Garden of Forking Paths is a huge riddle or parable whose subject is time. That secret purpose forbids a sweep in from the merest mention of its name. So, every single bit of it is dealing with this thing as if there is a text called The Garden of Forking Paths other than Borges's story.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's so awesome. And then we come up to the end there, or the next paragraph where,
Hmm.
all in all, I said, not without a tremble, that I am grateful for and I venerate your recreation of the Garden of Sweepin. Not at all, Albert replied, or whispered with a smile. Time forks perpetually into countless futures. In one of them, I am your enemy. I
Hmm.
again felt that pullulation I had mentioned. I sensed that the dew-drenched garden that surrounded the house was saturated infinitely with invisible persons. Those persons were Albert and myself, secret, busily at work, multiform in other dimensions of time. I raised my eyes, and the gossamer nightmare faded. In the yellow and black garden there was but a single man, but that man was mighty as a statue, and that man was coming down the path, and he was Captain Richard Madden. So he starts seeing the paths,
All of the
all the
different
choices.
possibilities. And you said that word was there again. What is it in English?
Pullulation,
Pullulation.
Pullulation.
Yeah, and I told you it was something similar in Spanish, and I also don't know what it means, so it might be made up, like you said. And it's almost this feeling of something that you can't really comprehend and you can't really wrap your head around. And it's something that he feels right before Richard Madden shows up, like you said, after Stephen Albert is listing some examples from his ancestor's book. And then right before he gets to Albert's house, in which he starts thinking about labyrinths and seeing the world in an abstract way. So it's almost this out of body experience in that he's not able to understand what he's imagining, essentially. And then in all of those situations, he's pulled back into reality by something that happens. So as Stephen Albert is talking to him and he starts to feel this way, Stephen Albert continues to speak, and so he's pulled back into reality. And then in the last thing you were talking about, he starts to feel this way, and then he sees Richard Madden approaching the house. So he's pulled back into his own reality again.
Right, his pursuer. That's there to capture him or kill him if necessary.
Yeah,
it's awesome. So with this, and it goes right to the end. That's pretty much the end, because he says the rest is unreal and insignificant. In the face of this awesome idea, you know, a lot of the rest of this guy's life is completely insignificant. But what does he do? He says in response to Albert talking about, you know, being enemies in some version of this timeline. He says, well, don't worry, I'm your friend here. Let me read that letter again. And Albert turns around again, and the language is very much the same as the first time Albert turns around and gets that letter out of the desk, and our narrator shoots Stephen Albert in the back. And he dies before Madden can get there and catch him. And we see the conclusion to the plan and the cat and mouse narrative that's going on with the conflict of egos between Madden and our narrator, that our narrator wins that one because he's able to murder Stephen Albert, whose name, Albert, is the name of a strategic target for the Nazis, and he wanted to just get that information out there, and by that being in the newspapers, it's out there, and he's successful at that egoistic, horrible plan. He's successful, and I thought, and I was just kind of heartbroken at the end of this story that is the choice that he made to do that. But then when we were talking, there's so much more hope than that, because this story does illustrate to the reader, that anything that you can think of as a possibility of what might have happened did happen.
Yeah.
In some other version of the story that Borges wrote.
Two things. So you said that the scene was described the same way when Albert gets up to first show him the letter, and then it was he stands up again one last time before Yu's son shoots him. And I like how that those two scenes parallel each other, but they also show the two different scenarios that could have happened and how things played out, but also how those two paths sort of converge. So they could have been enemies from the beginning, or this could have happened in which Albert thought that they were friends and then they were enemies. So multiple things could have led to him killing Albert.
Right.
And then what was I gonna say? I don't know. You go.
It's wild. There's a sense that this kind of information is just too big. Too big for the individual or narrator to accept, too big for him to allow to augment his decision making and what he's going to do. He just goes on with his plan. Too big for the world at large to actually have some kind of a confirmation that this is actually the way that reality works, if it does like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That it's just too big for human
Yeah.
minds, these kind of truths. And it's very well done. Borges is awesome at this.
That trying to comprehend this sort of this garden of forking paths is the real nightmare, which is what we were talking about.
Right.
And that again, I can't quote from it, but when he sees Richard Madden arrive and he is sort of pulled back into reality, he's relieved because that's something that he can understand. That's his
Right.
reality, and it's horrible because he's gonna have to kill a man who, he has a strong link to, because he is able to understand all these ideas that his ancestor was coming up with. And then he's also going to be sentenced to death, and he knows he's going to die soon. But he would rather have that than trying to wrap his hand around this whole idea of the forking paths.
Right. I mean, and to have one, I was thinking about it earlier when I read it again. Like, you have a bullet with one, or a gun with one bullet in it. There's tell Stephen Albert that somebody's after you and ask him for a place to hide and shoot Madden. You know what I mean? And you kind of like I root for the wisdom. That's what I want. I want those wisdom to come out, and this kind of idea of, well, how would it reshape human society or something like that. But that's where Borges throws you. You know what I mean? Just in this, and then I'm thinking, well, why would I want him to shoot Madden? Madden's the good guy. This guy's an operator for the Nazis, and so Borges just, you're putty. Your mind is putty in Borges's hand. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yasmin, we're at like 32 minutes. I'm gonna call it if we're cool, unless you've got something else you want to add for sure.
No, I think that we're good.
This is some awesome reading. Thank you so much for buddy reading Borges with me. I think next we might do something. We were kicking around doing the South, and we're kicking around doing the Death and the Compass.
Yeah.
And maybe and we'll come up and we'll do Library of Babel sometime soon. Thank you, BookTube. Thank you, Yasmin.
Thank you.
See you next time.